During that time of my life, I didn't understand how destructive my anger was and the impact it was really having on me. It was so much easier to be angry than it was to figure out or talk about why I was really angry or what I was feeling underneath. But what was I really feeling underneath that anger? I found that anger was a Trojan horse hiding deeper emotions that were in fact more related to feelings of vulnerability. It was so much easier to embrace anger as my dominant emotion because it didn't require vulnerability and introspection. I displayed anger because saying I felt helpless, hopeless, afraid, sad, hurt, or embarrassed would have made me feel far too vulnerable. I was angry and I wanted to blame other people for my anger because we all like solutions where we don't have to change or do something differently. But why was I so angry? While completing my master's in counseling, it was until I read a book called Anger, the Misunderstood Emotion. And that is when my relationship with anger changed forever. I learned anger can be healthy and a necessary emotion that does actually have constructive aspects, but that only happens when it's expressed and managed appropriately. The key to anger being productive lies in the ability to understand the root cause of the anger and the real emotions inside that Trojan horse. Maybe I should pause here and start from the beginning. Much of what I teach on this channel centers around behavioral finance because all markets really are is a reflection of humans interacting with each other. Behavioral finance explains how emotions, human psychology, and cognitive biases shape financial decisions in markets. It argues that people do not actually make rational decisions, especially as it relates to money and investing. As a quick aside, this is why technical analysis is so valuable, because on the most simplistic levels, it provides a visual representation of how people are behaving in the marketplace, which allows us to make higher probability bets around future price action. Ironically, you can actually count on people to be emotional. This is what brings me to the topic of this video, anger and silver. I'm not sure if you noticed, but the tone and theme of thumbnails around here has definitely changed. After years of rocket ships and other price hype, we now see people questioning stacking silver, not buying, and some even selling. The sentiment went from this euphoria and excitement to frustration, fatigue, and even anger, and it's been very dramatic. The root of all this can simply be summed up in one word in my mind: expectations. A very large number of people entered this market after 2020 with the expectations that they could corner, even manipulate, or squeeze the silver market. Unfortunately, that was based on some fundamentally flawed logic. That aside, the expectations were set, and when that didn't happen, the narrative shifted to it was imminent that prices were going to explode. The expectation was that triple-digit gold was right around the corner. Unfortunately, we now have created a community of stackers who expect this to be a quick squeeze or expect to get rich quick, expect silver to take off. So of course, when things got tough, we're seeing people starting to sell their silver just to get away from the investment. And let's not even discuss the number of people that overbought metals because the silver squeeze was going to make folks rich. They did establish a set of unreasonable expectations. And this is why people are so frustrated with silver right now. Now, some of you will say, no, Dr. Stacker, I'm not frustrated with silver. I'm frustrated that I bought silver for $35 or $40 only to see it trade at half the price over the last 2 years. Or you might be frustrated that the market is so manipulated by the big banks. The reason why you're frustrated or mad about silver doesn't matter to me. But it should be critical to you. If you find yourself frustrated or angry over the silver price, let me share a few quotes to help you maybe rethink this a little bit. Quote, in the era of instant information and market hype, it's easy for investors to develop unrealistic expectations. The challenge lies in distinguishing between genuine investment opportunities and exaggerated promises that often lead to frustration. Or how about this quote? Frustration is a function of our expectations, and our expectations are often a reflection of the social mirror rather than our own values and priorities. Quote, when frustration and unrealistic expectations meet, disappointment is inevitable. Frustration is the result of having unreasonable standards and trying to force the world to meet them. Or how about, it's not the world that causes frustration, but our insistence that it should conform to our unrealistic expectations. One of the worst things you can do as an investor is set unrealistic expectations. And I think that is the biggest problem within the silver community. Fundamentally, I don't disagree with some of the claims about silver, but I fundamentally disagree with the magnitude of silver price and the timing of the move. Depending on how you feel about me at this particular moment, fortunately or unfortunately, I can actually prove this. Let's spend a few moments here debunking some of the flawed logic so that we can set some more realistic expectations without the hype or the hysteria. As the saying goes, it's better to underpromise and overdeliver. First, in general, we would all agree that stocks and precious metals move in opposite direction of one another. So after the 2020 global issue, were we in a stock bull market or a bear market? Bull market. And here's a chart of the S&P 500 bull market since 1957. So if we know that we were still in the stock bull market, why would any of us expect silver or gold to outperform since 2020? Second and third point, we all know that in bull markets, gold leads and silver follows. It's not until the end of the bull market that silver catches up and then outperforms and overperforms compared to gold as the bull market peaks. Next, in general, precious metals markets, bull markets last around 10 years. So the question becomes, when did this metals market, bull market begin? Well, let's say it started somewhere between 2018 and 2022. If that's the case, we would anticipate this bull market lasting through 2028, let's say. If that's the case, we really shouldn't expect silver to really move until what, 2026-ish, towards the end of the bull market. This means that the people who are frustrated now and selling are falling for one of the biggest and oldest traps for the average investor, capitulating right before the market starts to perform. Why? Because as Rick Rule reminds us, many people have a hard time holding an investment through a long weekend. Fourth, when you look back over previous bull markets, it's not abnormal to experience pullbacks as much as 50%. This means instead of selling, people should be loading up right now. Going back to my previous point, the fundamental issue is patience. As the quote goes, patience is the antidote to frustration in investing. Unrealistic expectations are the poison. Or as Warren Buffett says, the stock market is a wonderfully efficient mechanism for transferring wealth from the impatient to the patient. Fifth, as this chart shows, silver historically underperforms during a recession. So if you believe the U.S. is headed towards a recession, wouldn't you expect silver prices to go down? And therefore, you would see this as a buying opportunity. Think about this as well. If you believe the recession has already happened and they're going to declare the recession after the fact, then this $22 price range, again, should be seen as a buying opportunity. Six, look at this chart of silver price and the gold to silver ratio. For the moment, I just want you to focus on the dark blue line, which represents quarterly closes for silver. Look at that chart and tell me, based on the chart, can you legitimately say, yeah, I can see silver going to $500 as a possibility? Come on. $100? Yes. $150? Sure, maybe. Think about this as well. $500 silver would represent a 2,170% increase from today's price. Say that number out loud and tell me that sounds like a reasonable expectation for silver to reach $500. Silver going to $150 from today would be a 500% increase. You tell me which expectation seems more reasonable. Seventh, now look at the blue line, which is the gold-silver ratio. Since 1983, the gold-silver ratio hasn't been below 40. So what makes you believe that the gold-silver ratio would return to a level it hasn't been in 40 years? And don't tell me it should be because of the ratio that silver is found in the Earth's crust. Scarcity is not the only variable that determines the value of something. And while I can keep going on, I'm going to stop at 7 because my point isn't to argue that silver is a bad investment. If that was the case, I wouldn't own as much silver as I do, and I wouldn't have stacked more than 1,000 ounces since 2021. Part of the reason why I am not frustrated with silver is because of my expectations. And not because those expectations are low either. Behavioral finance has really helped me in this particular area. In particular, as it relates to the impact of expectations and frustration on your behavior as an investor. Here are some key aspects behavioral finance warns against. Overconfidence and unrealistic expectation. And this really highlights the tendency of investors to be overconfident in their abilities, and as a result, they develop unrealistic expectations. The next one is loss aversion and frustration. Individuals feel the pain of loss more than we feel the pleasure of gains, which then increases our frustration even more so during a market downturn. This is what we're seeing. Herding behavior and frustration in trends. People tend to exhibit herd behavior following the crowd basically without conducting their own analysis. So then when there's a downturn, it only makes you more frustrated and makes you question the investment even more because you were following the herd, not following yourself. Next, confirmation bias and selective attention. Investors often display this kind of confirmation bias by giving more weight to information that confirms their existing beliefs and expectation. When reality contradicts these expectations, the frustration sets in at a very different level, and you as an investor have to confront the challenge of reevaluating your assumptions and adapting to new information. And most investors don't like doing that. And last, anchoring and fixed expectations. Behavioral finance recognizes anchoring, which is where individuals fixate on a specific kind of reference point, such as past prices or historical performance. And when the market deviates from these anchors, frustration occurs because as an investor, you have to struggle to adjust your expectation to the evolving kind of landscape and environment that you're in. And a lot of times people don't want to do that. You've heard me say this before. You, the investor, are one of the most dangerous things when it comes to your investments. One of the biggest ways this plays itself out is in you setting unrealistic expectations, especially when expectations are based on anything other than data, facts, and reasonable projections. If you're mad, disappointed, or frustrated about silver, look back at the history of this market and ask yourself, is silver doing anything different from what it has always done? And if you determine that silver is just being silver, doing what silver does, then the next step is for you to look at yourself and change your expectations. In the comments, share one of the wildest expectations you've heard people share about silver. What do you expect for silver from the rest of the year? Or simply put an A+ in the comments so that everyone knows that you always stack smarter and never stop learning.